Everyone's ablaze about all of the corruption in the Somali community in Minnesota. Well, I liked hearing from John Kennedy, which will be toward the end of this clip, second half of this clip, to kind of put Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz and all of that in context.
Well, now investigators are tracking the web of fraud to other Minnesota Democrats, such as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Many of the suspects linked to the scheme live in her district, including a restaurant owner who hosted events for her. He has since been convicted of stealing $12 million in COVID funds.
And explain the three major ways. These are absolutely how it all happened, how this is the greatest tax fraud in American history. That's what Newt Gingrich said yesterday. We'll hear from Ilhan, but mostly this is from John Kennedy on how this is the big strategy among all politicians. And this will go into other videos that I make this weekend about how they hide behind helping the children and helping the autistic to get you to pay them, and they're buying jets and boats. Here's the story.
The whistleblowers that I've spoken to are saying that the governor knew, and the governor and lieutenant governor and even Chris Schmitter, who was his chief of staff, came to them as staff and scolded them for pointing out fraud.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar told CNN this week she believes the fraud spiraled out of control because COVID programs were rolled out without sufficient guardrails.
Okay, that excuse doesn't work because the previous lady just said that they were scolded if they brought out fraud. And now Ilhan Omar's trying to hide behind the COVID rollout was what caused it all.
It's also worth noting the owner of the restaurant where Omar held her 2018 victory party is among those from the Somali community who have been convicted of profiting from the schemes.
Okay,
the level of fraud investigators are finding in
she didn't mention that part. Ilhan Omar, our gal, that the restaurant where she had her 2018 victory party are one of the major benefactors of this fraud.
All right, this news just breaking moments ago. Fox News has obtained photos of one of the Somali illegal immigrants wrapped up in the Minnesota fraud scandal, posing with several high-profile Minnesota Democrats, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Governor Tim Walz. The man pictured is Abdul Dahir Ibrahim. He entered the country in 2000 and has had an order for removal since 2004. He also has a prior conviction in Canada for asylum and welfare fraud.
Ripping people off for millions. She said nothing about it. She didn't care because they were hiding behind feeding the children. Here's Kennedy on the exact step-by-step of the exact three major ways that all this fraud happened, how it came about.
The businesses, many of which were Somali owned, which were getting some money to feed the children from Feeding Our Future, the nonprofit that was quarterbacking this whole thing, they weren't giving any of the money to hungry children. They were spending it. These businesses were spending it on yachts and vacations and jewelry and furniture for their home.
There's no way Ilhan Omar didn't see all that spending either.
That was scheme number one, but it got worse. The second scheme was supposedly to help people who are homeless. Remember, I said in America, when you're homeless, we'll house you. Well, that's what they were trying to do in Minnesota. A nonprofit was set up, again run by someone of Somali ancestry, and this nonprofit went to a bunch of providers who supposedly were going to provide housing, and they told the welfare authorities in Minnesota that they needed millions of dollars to house people who were homeless. And once again, the program started out small. When they started it in 2020, these crooks started it in 2020. They said, we only need $2.6 million. But then in 2021, they said, we need $21 million.
That's a big difference from 2 million to 20 million, and it keeps going up.
This looks like a complex scheme that was set up to defraud taxpayers, our federal government, of needed funds that would have gone out during COVID for hungry families, for children, for small businesses. And so when I first heard of the billion-dollar corruption, my mind immediately went to PPP. And I said from day one when I came in, it's a new day at the SBA. We are going to crack down on the fraud that the Biden administration completely overlooked, swept under the rug for 4 years. And it wasn't that hard. Within 48 hours, we already found $1 million worth of fraud within the Minnesota Somali crime network. And we're going to continue to investigate and work with our federal law enforcement partners. This is exactly what the democratic socialist welfare state is. It's massive fraud where officials look the other way, enrich themselves for it, and then hardworking Minnesotans, hardworking Americans pay for it in the form of taxes.
This is my beef, and this is why I have no problem calling this a Somali thing. The Somalis came to this country, the crooks, and their ethics are just, look, if you're going to give us money, we'll take it. I barely even blame them because they're going like, if you're giving away money, yeah, we'll ramp it up all day. And these dumb Democrats in Minnesota will continue to vote for it and support it so that they don't look racist. Remember, this is peak Black Lives Matter in 2020. That's why all this stuff is cultural. It's all cultural. But I do have one major indictment of the Somali people. Why are there no vocal Somalis right now in Minnesota calling out this fraud, saying this is wrong? Somalis can't do this. This culture from Somalia can't come into Minnesota and do this. Silence. None of them. And it's not like there's none of them there in Minnesota. They're taking over.
According to the Council of Europe in 2024, almost 50% of inmates in German prisons were foreign nationals or migrants. In Austria, the number was 53% of the people in prisons were from places that weren't from where they are now. In Greece, the number was 54%. And in Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, 72% of the people in prisons are from outside of Switzerland. When your prisons are filled with so-called asylum seekers who repaid kindness, and that's what they did, they repaid kindness with crime. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now.
So I would love to hear from the Somali community condemning this. If you really care about America and taxpayers and homeless and the poor, and wait, we're going to get to it, the autistic kids, they took advantage of autism. Now you're screwing with handicapped people or whatever, disabled, whatever you want to call it.
And in the following years, they said we need $42 million the next year, then $74 million to feed, or rather to house the homeless, then $104 million a year, not the total scheme, a year. It's just one problem. None of the money was going for housing. None of the money was going to help people who were homeless. These providers and this nonprofit that was coordinating it just put the money in their pocket. But there's more. They came up with a third scheme. This one just
is wicked.
This one makes you want to throw up in a potted plant. This one's centered around autistic children. Once again, in this third program, a group of providers, supposedly medical providers, got together and they went to the welfare authorities in Minnesota and said, we need money to help autistic children. You say, well, that's a wonderful thing to do. Mm-hmm. And then these providers, once the welfare department at the state government in Minnesota gave them the okay, they went out and started recruiting autistic children. You say, well, okay, we have to get the word out somehow. But they couldn't find very many autistic children. So they started going to parents in the Somali community and saying, can we call your child autistic?
Yeah, and this is a kind of a soft definition of autism where you can just say that they're on the spectrum. And close enough, you get the money. The crooks got the money. My friends have an autistic kid. They have to stay in California because they get so many benefits for him. And they're in a perfect home where he stays in a home and they get the payment from the government. And that is all on the up and up. There's not corrupt. They can't afford to do the corruption out in California. But here in Minnesota, in rerouting this money, they're using the honor of how we take care of our autistic kids. And they're using it to fatten themselves. They did the same thing with the homeless. They use the honor. We honor people who help the homeless. And they use that honor to line their own pocketbooks. There's a special place in hell for that.
Can we certify that your child is autistic? If you'll let us do that, we'll pay you a bribe. anywhere from $400 to $1,500 a child. Now, once again, the program, it didn't start big. These were sophisticated crooks, and its leader was a woman by the name of Asha Farban Hassan. She was also in, by the way, on the feeding of the children scam as well.
And so is Ilhan Omar on the feeding the children scam.
And as best we can tell, they approached parents only in the Somali community. But once again, they couldn't find enough autistic children, so they bribed the many parents in the community, gave them money to certify that their children were autistic.
And that points to the values. They couldn't find white autistic kids because we didn't have a culture of lying that our kids were autistic to get money. But the Somali culture, where you have a complete breakdown of civilization, you'll find much more of them with that culture. This is why we want to Americanize Somalis, not just give them our money. We want to give them our values. We want them to be patriots. We want them to love the Constitution. There's nothing about the brown skin and the DNA of a Somali that would keep them from being patriots. But when they come over in a giant clump and you have this enclave of a community that ends up protecting their crooked culture and defend it from America's better culture and the better people in Minnesota, that's what's happening with this giant clump of immigration by bringing them in because they were legit refugees in a war-torn country that is a third world hellhole.
In the first year, they were clever. They only asked for $3 million.
Oh, it's reasonable.
The second year, in 2019, they asked for $54 million. Then in 2020, they went up to $77 million. And then in 2021, they really got greedy. They went to $183 million. And in 22, $280 million.
That's $250 million.
And in 2023, $400 million.
Half a bill.
All total, in these three fraud schemes, these crooks stole $1 billion of taxpayer money.
And Tim Walz doesn't care, and Ilhan Omar doesn't care. They're not going to take responsibility. You know, blame should go up to the top, and all they want is all the cream and all the power, and they don't want any responsibility. And that, my friends, is why you never put it next to a Democrat, and that's why now you know the entire story of what happened with the Somalis, including Ilhan Omar, in Minnesota. I thank John Kennedy for straightening all that out. Give us a thumbs up, guys, and don't forget, we got more videos coming. I'm Doug in Exile.